Welcome back to my channel. You know, recently I was doing a video, and my video was basically how to create art out of a saw blade using your X-Tool Metal Fab laser. And I realized that I was kind of missing the opportunity. You know, most of my greatest learning is from my mistakes. And I thought, well, this is a good opportunity to show, because I have two mistakes here, and I can basically show two mistakes in the same video, and hopefully you can learn and you don't need to make the same mistake I did. Now, the first mistake was a costly mistake. This saw blade is actually about a $150 saw blade. Now, this is a steel cutting saw blade. It's just meant for cutting steel. It's actually an Evolution saw blade, 14-inch. And what I did was I needed to make a special tool, and I needed like a round piece of metal. And I decided, well, I'll just take I have tons of Phillips screwdrivers. I'll just take one of these Phillips screwdrivers, clamp it in my Evolution saw, and just chop it right off. The problem is not this particular screwdriver, but the one I cut was a hardened screwdriver. And even though it was this saw blade that I used, so I chopped this with my Evolution saw, and it ruined this blade. And the sad thing is, this blade has been cutting steel for me for over 5 years easy. And it's never missed a beat. It's a dry cutting saw. I just love that Evolution saw. And so I basically, in one little mistake, now I was able to cut this, and I was able to use it for what I intended. However, it ruined this $150 saw blade. And then the second mistake that I realized, and I didn't realize it until I was making a video about making art out of stuff you got laying around using the X-Tool Metal Fab. And basically, my idea was to take this saw blade, because it was a nice big round saw blade, and kind of create a piece of art with it. And I had seen someone do it, and it kind of turned out good, so I thought I would give it a try. And that's actually what I made. Let me know in the comments what you think. But the lesson is, basically I made two mistakes at the same time. Now the first mistake cost me a lot of money, $150, because I had to order a new steel blade because I use it all the time. But the second mistake was this blade's also hardened. So I ruined the blade cutting this Phillips screwdriver, and then I cut this out. Now, this had no failure. The laser actually cut through it pretty good. But I noticed in watching my video that, and it didn't overheat. It wasn't too much for it. It cut this out pretty easy. Matter of fact, when I pulled it out of the machine and dropped it on my workbench right here, everything fell out. So it actually did cut really well. But what I realized is, the lesson is, you need to know what you're cutting. And I didn't even think twice about it when I was cutting this. I thought, well, it's steel. I'll just use my settings for carbon steel and cut this. And I think the reason it cut so good is it's a little thinner than 1/8 inch. And I basically, well, the carbide teeth are about 1/8 inch, but the center part is a little thinner. And when I used my settings in X-Tool Metal Fab, I based it off of 0.125, 1/8 inch. And so it cut fine. But I did notice, and I'm going to show you in the video that I took with the GoPro, that even though the settings were enough to cut it out, the sparks that were on top of the saw blade, between the saw blade and the capacitor head, were what causing the head to get hot. And you don't want the capacitor head to get hot. Matter of fact, your goal with the laser is to cut through whatever material you're using and not see hardly any sparks between the blade and the capacitor head. You want all the sparks and everything to be going through down below your piece of metal. But yeah, those are my lessons for that was my learning experience for myself, and hopefully you can save yourself and not make that mistake. The worst one was ruining the blade, obviously, because it cost me $150. But you want to protect that laser from getting hot. I want to get many years of good use out of my laser, so I'm constantly trying to be really protective of the capacitor head overheating. And yeah, so this is what I ended up making, a little saw blade art, and it kind of gave me some ideas about, like, you know, a shop sign that could hang off your shop. Like, you could actually make a, you know, pretty big saw blade out of just regular steel that was like hanging off a little frame or something. But anyway, this is what I made. I had it laying around, so I thought that was cool. Anyway, let me show you what I saw that made me think about, you know, these mistakes and sharing them with you. And yeah, let's get to the video. Now this is where I decided to change my video. So originally this video was just going to be, you know, how to create art in a saw blade type of thing. But what I realized is I was missing the opportunity to show a good mistake. Now mistakes are, you know, that's how you learn. And what I realized, now this is cutting at real time. And when I was watching this in real time out in the shop, I saw all these sparks coming, like not all the time, but like watch between the blade and the tip. And you'll see there's quite a bit of sparks going on between the head of the laser and the saw blade. And I realized that something was off there, and I started to think about it, and I realized I was cutting, you know, even though the settings for thickness were pretty good, I was cutting hardened steel, so it's not the same as cutting regular carbon steel. So when you're cutting hardened steel, there's definitely something else going on. So, and a different setting that you need to do. Now, it did cut this out good, but if you watch the sparks, you know, see all those sparks that are coming up? That creates heat on your head, on the capacitor head, and you don't want that. So I basically, now I didn't have any kind of costly failure with the laser because I never really let it get hot or too hot. I always let it cool down. If it does overheat or anything, I'll stop and just let it cool down. But it taught me a valuable lesson. Like the saw blade, that was a costly mistake. That was $150. And what I realized is you really have to be careful, you know, what the material is. Whether you're cutting it with a saw blade, you're cutting it with a laser, you know, you're welding it, whatever you're doing, that's something that you really have to take into consideration when doing any of your projects. You know, what is that steel? Is it carbon steel? Is it tempered? Does it have some kind of hardening on it? You know, really be aware of the materials that you're using. Anyway, yeah, it still came out good, and I was happy with how the blade turned out. And I think it's a good way, like if you have some big blades that are you know, old, don't throw them away. You can basically cut them, but you really need to, you know, like I said, a saw blade is usually hardened, and it can cause you trouble. But yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. Please subscribe, like it, and I will see you next time. Later. Here you can see kind of the final product, and it was a pretty easy thing to do out of an old saw blade. And basically when I took it out of here and dropped it on my workbench, everything fell out.
There he goes, it's a working man. He's trying to make a living any way he can. And he'll break his back for $1 or $2. Oh, there ain't no shame in what he do.